Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for letting me come up here. As you mentioned, I have an outdoor industry commentary podcast called The Rock Fight, and a topic that comes up frequently on our show is outdoor industry trade show events. And I'm very excited to be able to moderate this panel with these specific guests, all of whom, as of this morning, are returning champions on The Rock Fight. We have Gabe debuted today, actually. Christine is a 2-time returning champion, and Sean actually a 3-time returning champion. So much like, yes, and give applause. And just much like Kenji, I don't know, you guys might not want to talk to them. I don't know. We'll find out during the Q&A section. But so before we get started, just a quick minute to set the table for what we're going to discuss in terms of what to expect. You know, the trade show and events conversation is an evergreen outdoor industry topic, right? Today's panel is maybe the first time we've ever had 3 directors of our bigger outdoor events in the same room to answer some questions that we will often see others talking about, especially on LinkedIn, if you're active on LinkedIn. And even if not, it's in the hallways. Trade shows and events have always been a conversations piece here in the outdoor industry, and I feel like they always will. And it's an opportunity for you in the room to ask some questions as well. So it's a pretty simple agenda. We have 3 trade show directors, so we're going to start with some trade show questions. But then we'll also ask about national gatherings in general, dates and locations of these events, and balancing the needs of attendees. But most of all, we do want to make sure we save plenty of room at the end for you guys to ask questions. So when we have another 35 minutes, so in about 20 minutes or so, I'll probably cut myself off to make sure we save at least 10 to 15 minutes for everybody to get all their questions in. So let's get it started. I want to start with a big picture, kind of a hot take that I've heard over the past few years. I'm guessing that each of you have as well. There are some who suggest in the industry, and I've heard this a lot from people coming on my show and just in observations and just, again, those kind of hallway conversations, that we don't even need trade shows anymore. We have the internet, we have all of these things that really kind of kill the real need behind a trade show. So with the leaders of 3 notable shows sitting on our stage, let's go around the horn and hear from each of you. Why does the outdoor industry need trade shows in 2024? Who would like to go first? Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Oh!
Lovely walk to the mic.
Gabe is leading.
That means he's going first.
Yeah.
I guess that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go first, Gabe. Yeah, you're I can't pass it off.
I think from our perspective, it's easy to see across. I mean, look at everybody that's here. Folks that I've talked to have just enjoyed being in each other's company. And we see across not just trade shows, but a lot of different areas that being in person is really important. So, you saw Amazon just call all their workers back to the office. There's a reason for that. We see physical retail come back after the pandemic. There's a reason for that. Just time and time again, it proves that when we get together and we can actually see, touch, feel product, have in-person engagements, it's just really important. So I think it's kind of obvious just how much the pandemic brought us that window into seeing it not happen and being able to reinforce how valuable it really is.
Hi everyone, happy to be here. I think you're going to hear from all of us, and I hope everyone in the room. Gathering people together is so important. There's not much I'm more passionate about than the importance of bringing people together and gathering. So, do we need a trade show? Absolutely. We need a gathering that trade show is a component of that gathering. So that gathering has a trade show, buying and selling taking place, as well as the connection and the education, the learning, mentorship, etc.
I don't want to just rehash. I agree wholeheartedly. I think we're all oversee trade shows because we believe in them. I mean, I started just a year ago, but I was involved with Surf Expo and OR, my previous career, and those shows make the industry. For this industry in particular, and when I came on board with our parent company, Emerald, I started on Elastic Suite, which is a B2B commerce site, which a lot of the brand leaders, we call our shows brands within our portfolio, felt threatened by Elastic Suite that they were going to replace trade shows. Now a retailer can go on and order, they can pre-book, they can look at a line, but it's actually not the case whatsoever. And the trade show is so important because of relationship building. And I think if you ask any retailer, some of the best brands they've picked up have not been just based on product, which I agree with Gabe wholeheartedly, touch, feel, see it, but it's the ability to connect with the owner, the founder, the merchandiser, the designer, and see that and say, this is somebody I want to do business with. I love your product, but I also believe in you and your team. I think that goes a long way. A brand like Salty Crew on the surf side is booming right now. It was already doing well, but it's booming. New team, new energy, and you can't go to one of their shows and not see the booth packed. And it's because the people behind it, and you don't know the people behind it unless you're out there. And then number two, again, trade shows really are, at the end of the day, they're for the retailer. The retailer is there to shop and see trends. The best retailers will go to a trade show because they get to see a wide range of trends as opposed to just one brand at a time. You can step back and look, see what are people in the booths wearing, what are the trends, what are the color trends, where are designs headed, is it baggy, is it slim fit, running shoes, when the move went to the big cushy soles, when are you seeing that? You're not going to see that going brand by brand. You've got to, as a retailer, take that kind of holistic view and see what's going on widespread. So there's so much that goes on in a trade show, let alone the dinners and the time at the bar at the hotel, that networking time. I think you all would agree that sometimes the biggest part of business is actually done after the show, but it's still a component of the show, which is what Christina said, and I agree with that wholeheartedly.
All right, 15 points to each panelist. Good job, guys. All right. Now, the other side of the coin to the we don't need trade shows point of view are the calls for a singular industry-wide national gathering. So this is a call, this is a common refrain we hear like almost daily in the industry for better part of 4 decades. We had a twice a year singular gathering. So again, let's go around the horn, and your opinion, obviously informed by the work you all do. Is the notion of a single national gathering even realistic in 2024?
You started, you get to keep going first. Yes.
We've established the order. We now have the order.
I think as grassroots and just talking to retailers and talking to many of the brands in our space, it's apparent there's a reason why we're up here having this conversation. And it's because of, I think everybody wanted to get together and see the whole industry, and I think part of your question too is like defining what a national gathering is. Probably right. I mean, that's a big piece of it. I think through the grassroots lens, it is gathering everybody together and being able to see the whole piece. We see a really great list of brands and retailers that connect and have for the past 20 years, but it's just a piece of the industry, and it's just a little slice. And I think back to going to kind of a retailer back in the 2015, 2014 was kind of when I started coming into the industry. That was kind of my first experience with a national show. And it just hits differently when you can really breathe it all in at the same time and have a bunch of different stakeholders from not only brands and retailers, but media, nonprofits, the entire community wrapped into that, athletes. It just hits differently.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and what is a national gathering? What does that mean? And with Switchback and what we're doing with Switchback Spring is it is a national gathering. I don't think so we're trying to be very forward-looking, right? So I think we do a lot of backward-looking of how things used to be, and there was this one place, and you did that, and so as we move forward, I don't know is it one singular national gathering? Is it a few? I don't know, right? We're listening to the industry and what that might look like. In year one of Switchback in June 2025, it's small, right? We're not coming in and saying it's gonna be 100,000 square feet. It will be small. We're in a Gaylord property. By design, it's not an event for everyone in this first year. And as we continue to learn and listen to the needs of the industry, that may change and evolve as we move forward. So, is it in 2025, is there one singular national event? No. But as we move forward, I don't know, right? I think we'll continue to learn, and we will make that decision with the industry, with all of you.
So I think what Christina just said is really profound, because that really is, I think we're all trying to figure out what you all need, to be honest with you. I mean, we hear different things. I get more calls a week telling me what somebody thinks OR should be, what the industry should be. We want OR to be like it was back in the day. It's not gonna happen. The industry changed, the pandemic changed the world, and retail changed. The sheer nature of retail changed drastically with the pandemic. And the idea is, if everybody truly wanted OR to be like it was back in the day, everybody would come back. But that's not the case, because not everybody's exactly sure what they want it to be. Now, could we have done a better job during times, and I've only been on for a year and a half, looking back historically, yeah, every show has made missteps along the way, just have the nature of it. To be honest with you, some of those things were taking chances, taking risks, because you can't just be the same thing year after year. So at the end of the day, national big event, I guess really it comes down to, does the industry need that? We can't answer that as show. We respond to you, the industry are our constituents at the end of the day, and so we listen to that. And right now, we're doing what Christina said, which is to listen and provide what we believe we're being told is what people need. And we have heard especially a need from smaller brands that have been pushed out of OR for many years just because of the sheer size of it. It was what we call a wall-bound show. There was no more room in the convention center to put another exhibitor in there. So the emerging brands got left out of it. Emerging brands don't have a rep force, so regional rep shows are typically not the sweet spot. So we're trying to serve needs, each of us, to find a need where it fits. I do believe every show should provide content. There should be content for retailers. I believe that's an important part of a trade show. It's not just doing business. I think doing business is the primary function of a show. All the other good feeling stuff that happened at OR back in the day, Ferris wheels and parties and Black Eyed Peas playing, I've heard it all. All of that happened because good business was being done. And that's what we have to remember. It's not because people wanted to go for a party. They went because business was getting done. They felt really good about it, and it was easy to spend money on a Ferris wheel and name brands and bands and petting zoos and everything else that went on back in the day. But that was ancillary because everybody was writing a lot of orders and selling a lot of shit. And so you could throw a party like that. Well, we're not in that space right now. And I think as that feel-good comes back and where the business starts to really pick up, inventory starts to come down and normalize, yeah, those gatherings will feel good and they'll naturally extend from that. I mean, we felt that at our June show where a lot of those retailers came in and said, this is great. I'm seeing brands I've never seen before. So there was a natural buzz to the show, and that comes from business being done on the show floor, and it grows from there.
All right, negative 5 points for Sean for bringing up the Black Eyed Peas.
I didn't book them.
It's not 2008. All right, but good segue into the needs of attendees, right? So let's talk about those who attend the shows. We're holding this panel at a media event, but I imagine in this room right now we have, in addition to members of the media, there are executives, brand, maybe some product folks, sales folks, all of whom find value in what a trade show can offer. And all of them have some level of tunnel vision in their expectations of what a trade show should be. So Christina, let's start with you. When you're planning out something like Switchback, which at first was an expansion of the running event and is coming up to be its own standalone show, how do you take into account the expectations of who are attending? Where does the priority have to be placed?
Yeah, so our focus is the retailer. At the end of the day, by focusing on the retailer and the needs of the retailer, we believe we can build that community and build the vibrant event that we're looking for. So, with the running event, that has always been our focus. And through that, we have built this vibrant running community. And we want to take a similar model and apply it to Switchback. It will look different, of course, they're distinctly different audiences, but by that focus on the retailer, we believe that is how we are going to create that vibrant industry and community. We are currently, we have Marcus Wolf, if anyone knows him in the audience. He is right now going around and visiting retailers, doing retail visits, to really get to know people again, right? Going into their stores, what's happening in your stores? What are your challenges? What are the opportunities? So that we can be sure that we are understanding the retailer and the needs as we continue to build Switchback.
So I want to turn it to Gabe. So Gabe, your show is different from Christina and Sean because you have a base of members that sort of act as your North Star, right? Who you need to put a show on for. But that said, your show is still open to those who aren't in the GOA, right? Other retailers can attend. And you maybe bring in some other conservation organizations. The Conservation Alliance was at the summer show. So how do you go about looking to leverage Connect, have a broader impact while still keeping the focus on the member experience?
Not a whole lot, to be honest.
All right, so next one.
Say Black Eyed Peas.
I think that's a big part of where we've tried to live is we have 95 member retailers that are our core community that we serve first and foremost. Probably for the past 5-6 years we've had another 50 retailers that show up to the show. It's been an open invite. We have typically send out to brands and say, hey, are there any other independently owned retail stores that you want to see at the show? And that's just naturally where we've balanced. That being said, we are constantly looking at, because of the scheduling that happens at our shows, so we pre-schedule. Retailers essentially get a list of all the brands and categories they're going to be at the show, say here's who I want to see. We schedule the days and times of those. Gives us really good insight into the interactions that happen at the event. And through that, we know that about 10% of our buyers every event are fully booked. 32 hours of showtime, they're booked 32 hours. So inviting another 50 brands to the show doesn't accomplish all that much because we have a bunch of buyers that don't have more time and can't see more brands. And similarly on the brand side, we see probably our top 20% of brands that are at capacity in terms of the number of retailers that they can see. So within that, I think we do look to expand. We open up our education day that happens before the show to guest retailers, and try to find ways that we can support, broader industry growth or conversation within that, within the confines of what we're trying to accomplish. But, our core goal maintaining moving forward is just to keep doing what we're doing and keep supplying that core business need.
And Sean, the last time you were on the Rock Fight, you told me that the way to make outdoor retailers successful, it sounds like it's going to be on theme with the other two panelists, is to put the focus on the retailer. So how have you and your crew, how do you and your crew plan to keep that focus tight while still enticing others to attend the show?
Yeah, we did talk about that. Great question. So first off, just in terms of getting buyers there, we instituted in June, it was our first year doing a hosted buyer program. So investing hundreds of thousands of dollars with the idea of retailers right now, look, we all know it, travel sucks, it's awful, delays, flight cancellations. It's hard enough for a retailer to get out of their store, to take time away, let alone trust the people you have running your store, finding good help. I mean, all of those are challenges. So we wanted to remove one other stumbling block and just going, which is airfare, hotel. It's a tiered system. It's not like we're flying everybody in. It's impossible to do that. But we're focusing on the retailers that our brands have asked for. Here's who we need to see, specifically by category. And I think it's something that's hurt us in the past, for instance, is you don't get the right buyers for the right categories. Footwear doesn't have enough buyers. The show is not good for the footwear section, so forth and so on. So hosted buyer. But being an old media magazine guy, we do serve two audiences. There's no doubt about that. If you're a magazine or now website and you're media, you have your advertisers and you have your readers or subscribers. You've got to serve both. So our job is to make sure we have enough readers, your buyers are coming. But you also have to provide a format for the brands, the advertisers, the ones that want to run the ads. You're going to get out of the trade show what you put into it at the same time. You can print a magazine and run a shitty ad and nobody's going to care. It's a bad ad. So if you put up a shitty booth and sit and don't look up from your phone the whole time, you have a bad experience. So we have to what's that? No, yeah. You have to provide that canvas, but the industry's got to respond. You look at what Sunbum did at our show this year. They were a focal point because they had a lot of activity. People wanted to be there. And so we do serve two masters. You do have to provide a good canvas, and that is a challenge for every show. Have we given people enough for an exhibitor to spend that kind of money to be there? We serve the retailer, but at the same time, the ones spending tens of thousands of dollars to be there and set up are the brands. And so are we giving them that canvas that is exciting enough and everything around it? It's quite a balance. I mean, it really is.
So one more topic, then we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. Where we hold these shows and when they are held are a staple of outdoor show discourse and a very loud section of post-show surveys, I think it's safe to say. Is it fair to say there's a frustration that I've noticed with the conversations I've had with each of our panelists where they talk about where the shows are held or where they should be held, and I have a question for each of you on this topic. So Christina, the running event was for a long time held in early December, then moved up into November. So can you give us what was the reasoning behind that, and do you still feel like that's the right move? How do you sort of look on that in hindsight?
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew there was going to be a conflict in our dates years ago. So we are typically the week after Thanksgiving. We knew there was going to be a conflict. The convention center booked another event much larger than us. So we knew that was coming. So we went to the industry, to an advisory board of retailers and brands and said, hey, we can't be in our typical time frame. We can't be in our typical time frame in Austin. Would you prefer we move earlier and remain in Austin, or keep our typical dates and move to a different location? And the feedback was, we want to remain in Austin in 2024. So with that feedback, we moved before Thanksgiving. It is a 1-year thing, so if any of you are familiar with TRE and the running event, we are moving locations in 25. That is because Austin is demolishing their convention center. They are rebuilding it, but it will take them 4 to 5 years. So because of that, we are moving to San Antonio, and we will be back in our typical time frame after Thanksgiving.
So Sean, keep going down the other side here. Outdoor retailer could probably write a book about moving dates at this point. And the summer show historically was an August show for a long time. Why does June still make sense?
It's a great question. Gabe and I have talked about this quite a bit.
Oh, we're getting the game.
Yeah. So look at all of Circana's research. Talk to a lot of the brands in terms of when line break dates, when they need to get their orders in. You're making product for the following year. You've got supply chain issues. Yes, they've eased up, but it's always a challenge. You've got Chinese New Year if you're manufacturing overseas. There's so many things that get factored into that. The move to June was before I came on board, and we do believe June is the right spot. I know there are a lot of retailers that would love to place orders more in July, maybe even early August. Gabe and I have talked about that. I don't disagree with them. The challenge we have is that a lot of the brands have said, July is just too late for me. I'm going to miss my deadlines for manufacturing. I'm going to be over inventoried. There's always both sides to it, so it's really tough. And especially as we're serving a lot of emerging brands right now, that need for June is definitely there because they're trying to compete with bigger brands, legacy brands, and so June remains important for us. So is that the only question? Was more of June, or was there a veiled question in there somewhere? Or something?
No. Let's let Gabe talk now. It's okay.
Okay, good.
No, but Gabe, again, your event's different, right? The primary attendees are members of the GOA, but you recently stated on a post on LinkedIn that June's the wrong time for a national show. Can you give us your rationale behind why you think that?
I think a lot of it goes into defining purpose, as I kind of started with earlier. And, we see retailers, June in particular, as we all know, is when order deadlines come up. The business of line showings and order writing, I would posture, has been getting done. It's the essential business of the entire industry. We have not gone a single season without that business getting done before the pandemic, during the pandemic, since the pandemic. So it's happening currently. And I think, what we see is just simply, many of our retailers, the business that they're focusing on, or the most important things is the business that keeps the lights on. So they have to see their North Face line, they have to see the Patagonia line, It takes time. It's very time consuming, and you know, like our show, all the retailers go to the show, they go straight home and they're writing orders. Many of those buyers are also working for their stores during a super busy time of the season. And so I think, you know, for both of, you know, the other shows up here, it's not to say that, you know, you can't have a show in June. I just think there's a better likelihood of retailer attendance if it's not during that critical time frame. And I think for, you know, probably asking a lot of the brands in the industry, it's getting focused around what you're trying to accomplish. Do you really want to show up, and is your core purpose of a national show to show your line to your core retail buyers? Or is it to show up in the industry and have a chance to see how your brand fits into the rest of the brands in the entire space? Is it to be able to gather everybody together, multiple stakeholders? Those are two different things. It's not to say that some line showings won't happen, you know, in late July or August when, you know, like OR dates typically were before the pandemic. But, you know, I think there's a lot of other business that's really important that can get done as well.
So last thing I want to ask all of you, and thank you very much all for being here. I want to ask if you guys one last chance to answer this question prior to the audience Q&A, because that'll take us right up to the end. And one thing I've observed a lot of my time in the outdoor industry and doing my podcast is we're a bit of a sensitive industry. We have a lot of opinions, but we always maybe like to talk about it more quietly. So the fact that the three of you can sit on the stage and answer these questions professionally and give your opinions is great. But also one thing we say on the Rock Fight is that, you know, we're aiming for the head, but it comes from the heart, because it kind of has to with the outdoor space, because it's a passion-driven space. So the last thing, I'm going to poach a question I heard my friend Doug Schnitzbahn ask somebody once, and I would like you to go down the line and answer the question, and then I'll set up our Q&A, is what gives you hope, either for the industry, for your show, but what gives you hope as you sit here today in the summer of the fall of 2024? Christy, I want you to kick us off.
Many things give me hope. I think at the end of the day, it's the people in the outdoor industry. You know, I am new. I know that. I'm still learning. I'm still getting to know all of you. But everyone that I've met, you're such a passionate, capable group, and I think together we can build a very vibrant industry.
This right here, this gives me hope. Conversation. You know, I think there's been discussion around like, oh, you know, LinkedIn's becoming this opinionated place. Fantastic. Like, we learn when we share each other's, you know, perspectives. And, you know, Sean said on Rockfight just a few weeks ago, like, we all have a unique lens. Getting to view the world through somebody else's lens is super important. And I think that's, you know, whether we're talking about trade shows, brand and retailer relationships, I think the industry is talking right now and getting back to kind of robust conversation, and that's where understanding and compassion comes from.
I think what gives me hope, I mean, I agree with Christina and Gabe on both of those, so I applaud them, great answers. I think for me, the outdoor space after the pandemic, to see the world finally recognize that being outdoors is not just for the core participant. Granted, that will always be our bullseye of a target, but the pandemic taught the world that being outdoors is good for your mental health, it's good for you physically, and has really opened up the world to see that getting outdoors and getting your kids outdoors, getting off of video games. You know, a lot of us probably grew up out in the woods or at the lake or fishing or whatever it may be, and nowadays most kids don't want a fishing pole or hiking boots, they want a phone, they want a tablet. And so we were reminded that being outdoors is good for your mental health, it's good for your physical health. And so you're seeing a lot of brands get into this and say, I want to be part of the solution for that. And to see a new brand show up at a show and say, I wrote orders today and, you know, I'm going to be shipping in a few months. That's amazing. You know, these entrepreneurs that have been working in their garage with what we call M&D money, mom and dad money, and funding their own business, and there they are writing their first orders at a show and say, I'm going to make it. Like, this has viability. And knowing that's going to go help somebody to enjoy being outdoors in the sun or camping in the rain or somewhere in the snow, it doesn't get much better than that.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess I'll,
Yeah, enough.
time to turn it over to you guys. Who has questions for our panelists? Come on now. There we go. You want the mic or just want to stand up?
Thanks, this is interesting. So I'm with Destination Zulu. I work with trying to get, meetings and conventions and groups in. So my question is kind of from that, how and why are you picking the destinations you're in? And, what about the kind of attendee experience do you think about other than just kind of like logistics, square footage, number of hotel rooms, airport, that kind of thing? Do you think about, do we need to have these brands and the retailers be able to try them on the trail, on the water? What goes in kind of to where these shows are, and if you want to move around or if you stick to Austin because you like it and part of the brand, just curious.
Well, where we are in Utah's got some history there, which if someone wants to get into that, I don't mind, but I'm not going to get into the political side. But if you want to ask, I'm more than happy to answer the question. But for us, being in Utah, we have been in Denver before, but being in Utah, first off, I don't think people realize how complex and how hard it is booking space, doing convention center business, hotel business. It is unbelievably difficult. I know Christina is probably even deeper than me, but you do not realize how far out the challenges if you're not delivering. Hoteliers pissed off because you might not have gotten as many people as they were. They're expecting this, and you're happy with where you're at. It is really, really complex, and if you're from a convention visitors bureau, you understand that. Picking Utah meant being in a outdoor destination, somewhere that was, we looked at Vegas, we've looked at all sorts of other places. Utah's an epicenter for outdoor recreation, and it does provide people an opportunity to go out, to hike, to climb, to go fishing, before, after, whatever it may be. But it's also convenience, so it's close to the airport, 15-minute drive. You land, you're at the convention center or the hotel. Great hoteliers, very safe, clean downtown, great restaurants. One of the bigger factors for us, to be honest with you, over even Denver, was the unions. And Christina knows this, and Gabe probably does too. Some cities are far easier to work with than others. New York City at the Javits Center, it's horrendous. Denver, horrendous. Utah, they're extremely lax. I mean, Andrew from Lives In, we had that conversation yesterday of how they're like, here, use our cart. You can take your stuff in, roll right up to the dock. So a lot of those factors go into where we're based and looking at, and it really has to do with overall cost for the exhibit, not necessarily for us. If we were at the Javits Center, we'd never have an OR, ever. It's so unbelievably expensive. It would be twice as much to do it there. So cost, location, convenience, outdoor recreation, all that kind of factors in.
Did you want to add it? Anybody else want to add? Christina, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I feel like Sean nailed it with kind of those factors. And yeah, of course, you survey the attendees after. It's like, what is important to you about a location? And you asked, yeah, like, is it Austin? Is that part of the brand, right? And it did become that, right? But when we had to move, it was, what is it about Austin that you like? What is it about Austin that made TRE what it is, right? And so we looked at accessibility, the walkability, Sean was talking about those kind of like serendipitous run-ins that happen at these events. And that doesn't happen when you're staying far apart. And so that was a big consideration as well. And, as we were looking at Switchback Spring, we really wanted to, for that to be a focal point, the connectivity and those serendipitous run-ins. So we decided to be in a Gaylord property, and so then that kind of narrowed down some of the locations. And so Nashville, Opryland is where we'll be, and by the exhibit hall being in one place, the education, everyone's staying there, there's 7 restaurants on property, you're keeping everyone contained and really encouraging those connections to take place.
So I've had the privilege of exhibiting at all 3 events, Outdoor Retailer and Grassroots, since more or less the inception. TRE for the last couple of years. I agree, you've all built historically great communities. I think there's some missing participants in this discussion. And I think today is a great, shall we say, step one. We're missing sales reps and all the regional shows that they have. I think they do a lot of heavy lifting in the business, and they're jammed into June, and they're jammed into June just like Gabe is, because that's when at least the big brands want their deadlines and their orders and that work to be done. And I think also missing today are some of the driver companies that are forcing those early deadlines and so on. Some of the bigger brands in our industry. It's not the small brands. The small brands are nimble and they're whatever. And I think that to really move this discussion forward, it needs to be a larger group of participants that includes some of the bigger brands and the rep groups, because otherwise you're just always going to be overlapping each other and kicking each other in the shins, and we won't move forward with this discussion. Which then, my only real question of the day is, Christina, hearing how jammed June is, why did you put your show right in the middle of the hodgepodge and on top of rep shows and OR and so on, instead of coming up with something maybe fresh or new?
It's a fair question, Peter. Thank you. So, when we first launched Switchback at TRE in 2021, we were creating a space for the outdoor industry within the running event. And that's what it was at the time. We were getting more outdoor brands, we were getting outdoor retailers, and we wanted to make sure that they had a place at TRE. As that continued to grow, we said, is this it? Is there more needed? And so we did a big study, and we hired a third party to do a study with the outdoor industry on what the need was. And it's kind of what Sean was saying. What we are hearing continues to be that June is the time. June is the important decision-making time in the industry, and as a gathering where the trade show piece is an important component. It's that buying and selling is a function of the event, and so to be viable, June was the time. And I will say, Peter, if we continue to hear, and if the majority starts telling us it is not June, it's later, we will listen, right? We are nimble and we're able to listen, but right now, the majority is still saying that June is the time for the national gathering.
I don't really agree. I was gonna ask, has anybody said May? Because as a small brand, we're not actually nimble. North Face can place all sorts of projected orders to get their product moving in time. We need blue seasons and trade show data to make good buying. And June is packed. And then when you have a June trade show where you go in early June, your deadline is June 15th to June 20th, and no one has time to do it. So I mean, I guess the answer is though, like there are May shows. Brands are ready by May. Because we're not.
Yeah, I'm curious, Sean, if what you've heard, the end of May has come up, right? But then you kind of run into Memorial Day and all of that. So there's many factors in the puzzle. So it has come up, not often. Sean, I'm not sure if you have.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the simplest answer back would be a business thing. And again, hopefully for those of you in here that run businesses and so forth, you understand that we signed a contract with the Convention Center specifically for June. And so it'd be great to say, hey, Salt Palace, we're just gonna back up a few weeks, and we got like 9 other, so we hear, and I think Christina, this is the battle I talked about, and the lens is what I was talking about with Gabe, what he would refer to as on the rock fight is, it's easy, and again, when I was with SEMA on the surf industry side, we went to Roy Turner at Surf Expo, and at the time ASR still existed. Oh, you gotta move to these dates. And then 2 years later, it was like, oh, whoa, you know what? We were actually better off when we were there. It was constant. So I'm not saying you're not right. The problem is we've got a 7-year contract with the convention. We go to 2027. So before that, like Christina, every trade show does surveys. We constantly survey. What are the needs? What are the right dates? Will we look at that in 2025 and 2026 as we're looking forward to 2028 and beyond? No question we will. And things have changed over the course of that 7-year contract. But where we're at right now, we don't, I mean, I'll be blunt, we don't have a choice. It's not like we can just shift dates and be, we're battling Juneteenth, Father's Day. There's never a good time. There's never a good time on the calendar. I promise you that. We'd move to May and somebody come out and say, why didn't you go to April? You could have got one more week. That's how it feels. And I get that we know what the business window is. And so our job is to, I talk about this all the time, there's a bell curve, the outliers that want to go in August and those that want to go in May. And so you look at the bell curve and you always aim for the top of that bell curve. You're not always right and it's not always perfect. But that's where you try and serve that middle of that bell curve, that top of that bell curve, and it's a tough one because everything switched. The supply chain 5 years ago, this date question would have been far different than what we're having right now. It's amazing. And as a trade show producer, when you lock into contracts and supply chain changes the way everybody's doing business, you're like, fuck no. But I mean, you did everything you could, and now you're still wrong. And so, again, I think that's part of why these conversations sometimes good is like, if you only knew what we went through. And that's not what this is meant to be, but we listen as often as we can, and it's great that you all want to hear too. Like, hey, we understand what you're going through when supply chain became an issue, or Chinese New Year and all these other things that what we've got to move around. So that's, the open dialogue is great for that. So
I'm gonna just chime in super quick on that. So our show's been both June and November, have been in June and November since the early 2000s. Was the early show initially that came across. We've kind of, I think not so much recently, but in years prior have had conversations around, should you shift your dates earlier? Most rep shows, 5-10 years ago were happening after Connect. Now they're before. Somebody has to stop leapfrogging, because I can tell you, I feel pretty safe saying that we have a large group of retailers that are like, hell no. Don't keep moving it earlier, because as soon as you do that, then we're just gonna jump a whole season at some point and say like, why don't we just write orders even earlier and earlier? But that'd be my comment on that.
Over the years, we've had a couple of iterations of trying to incorporate an outdoor component to the trade show. We had the rendezvous, we had the outdoor stuff, and the training, and we have other events. Do you think it's important to have an outdoor, outside component to a trade show, or should a trade show continue to be a trade show, just be doing business?
you mean a consumer aspect?
No, for the industry to get outside and do stuff.
The on-show demo that used to
Yeah.
happen.
Okay.
Demos and outdoor testing, things like that.
Well, I'm happy to. I'm a firm believer that the outdoor industry, kind of like the bike industry, other water sports, has become more, they've gone from being not primarily, but participation in those sports was core oriented. Now, you look at something like Sea Otter Classic, it succeeds because it's not just about going and watching the sport. Everybody that goes to watch, most of those that go are also participating. They're racing somewhere. Families are now doing it. Outdoors, that same way. Having that component worked really well back in the day. Now, I think it's a major challenge. We're a 3-day trade show. You all are 4?
4.
And you're 3? So 3 days. You add that outdoor component, where's that going? Front or back? So then you've got another day of staying in a hotel room, another day of T&E, all of that tax on. It's a beautiful idea, and I love the outdoor experience, and I think it really makes that event worthwhile. But nowadays, most people are like, on day 3 by noon, I want to get the hell out of here. And so the idea of having something you can't do in the morning, I mean, it's such a challenge. I think we'd all love to do it in a perfect world. In theory, it's exactly what we should be doing. But in practice, I just don't know how we can pull that off and have people actually stay and participate.
I actually want to give, because Christine, the TRE's always had 5Ks, there's been a real, that, like, I'm just kind of curious as a follow-up.
Yeah, I was thinking about it as you were talking. I think with running, it's just a little bit different, right?
Right.
You can just meet in the lobby and go out for a run, whereas to get out on the mountains takes hours. So I think it's a little bit different. You can build it in the morning, in the afternoon, what have you. So I think it's important to get outside and do it. Is it part of the future of events? I'm not sure, right? If that is an important component, it's like, do you do a half-day trade show and then, go out? But I think Sean said it on the Rock Fight too. If you do 3 days, people leave after 2.5, right? So
You do 2 days.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So
I think we're super short on time.
Yeah, it's
so
the last
over.
question.
But Andrew sparked a good question from my perspective, which is, it feels like from the brand side, there's a lot of tension between big brand, small brand. And I was at FIAF, I'm now an emerging brand, and I think this balancing act between the big brands have an army of analysts, they can build forecast orders, they have supply chain command. Lightning rounds, sort of how do you balance between, from a brand perspective, who's the target customer as who are you trying to make most happy, small brand, big brand? And maybe just lightning round, single word answer.
It's okay, just take a minute and answer. Go ahead. It's the last
yeah,
one.
I think it's both, right? I'm gonna kind of cheat, but I think it's important to take feedback and thoughts from both and figure out a way to provide value for both the established brands and emerging brands, and it is possible. So it's accomplishing both.
I'm going back to everybody getting together. Big brands and small brands have similar needs in the way that they want to get in front of new customers. Getting in front of new customers often isn't the same as working deeply with a core customer. Those two things are different in our opinion. So, you're not going to work. I think it's, again, I'm not trying to go back to the history, but, I think many people have experienced OR back before the pandemic, and that was not the best environment to work with, one of your most important accounts, to see a line show. And so, but it is a wonderful place for a retailer you're not working with to walk by your booth and go, wow, this looks really interesting. I should go contact my rep and see this line.
It's a loaded question, especially for Christina and I, because if you say one or the other, somebody, this will be recorded out there, is going to be pissed off. What I will say is we have to be wanting both brands there, legacy, otherwise, and it's not just size, it's also legacy as well. We want both there. I mean, again, go back to the magazine thing. You want your big advertisers in there, of course you do. But look, I do believe that some of the best innovation coming from our industry and creativity, what keeps sameness from fucking up specialty retail, is the up and coming emerging brands that are taking risks, they're innovating, they're looking to fill a need, they're seeing a gap somewhere and saying, I think I can come up with something to fill that gap. So I think if we don't focus on that, then it looks like all you're focusing is on the big brands. We have decided, we have made a concerted effort to make sure we are serving the emerging brand market. That is what we're doing. We're adding an emerging brand section called Ascent. We're really pushing for our state OREC pavilions, because that innovation is going to keep specialty retail from sameness. Sameness kills industries like ours. It kills the surf industry, it kills the bike industry, it kills where the consumer walks in and doesn't know brand from brand what the hell is up on the wall. So I think we all need to be serving the emerging brands. They were left out of the OR picture for so long because it was so big. And if your booth was two stories and 4,000 square feet and you were 10 by 10, you never got seen. So we are fixing that 2,000 square foot booth caps. So we want you there as a 2,000 square foot legacy brand, but we're really excited also to have the emerging brand there. So I will go on record saying I think we are putting a lot of focus on emerging brands, because that's going to drive creativity and keep the specialty retailer finding something that the big box guys may not have right now.
All right, we gotta wrap it up there, guys. Nobody leaves yet. Kenji has some housekeeping to go over with you guys, but thank you all. Thank you to our panelists.